Hello everybody, here we are again, and thanks for coming back. We just took a quiz in this class, the face-to-facers, and let's go ahead and switch over to what that quiz was. I might even have this quiz for you in your handouts for you folks, you online students. So if you can, just without looking at your notes, just take a second and see if you can do that quiz, and then pause us and start us up when you are done. Okay, let's go ahead and go over the answers to that. The answers that I got for computing cost of goods sold for a merchandiser and manufacturer were these right here. Does those numbers look familiar to anybody? Okay. I always put some items in there that you didn't need, okay? But those cost of goods sold equations will be used a lot in this class and in managerial accounting. So the more you can understand them and the quicker you can work with those, the better. All right, let's go to the doc cam now and differentiate between product versus period costs, okay? For the following costs, circle the appropriate cost classification. Okay, wages of assembly line workers, what is it? Product. You see the word assembly, by the way. Salary of accounting controller? Period. Property taxes for factory building. Product. Lumber used in production of tables. Product. And these had those words that we were looking for, right? They don't always have those words, but if you see those words, you know they're product cost. Fire alarm system used in factory. Product. Depreciation expense for sales staff, company cars. Period. Okay? All right, how'd you all do on that?
Grand.
Excellent. Okay, let's take a look at the homework that I gave you. I believe I assigned you exercise 813, is that correct?
1813.
What did I say?
813.
Why do I keep wanting to make this chapter 8? Why is that, Luke?
You love accounting 1 so much.
I love accounting 1. Okay. Thank you. Let's go over exercise 1813. Thank you for keeping me on my toes. Now, a little bit of review here. This is the answer to 1812, which we did in class the other day, didn't we? And we figured out this cost of goods manufactured of 534,390. And now we take that over to, okay, let's just do a little tick mark here. We take that over to the income statement, correct? That comes in right here, correct? All right, so there is the answer. I think I can blow that up a little bit. Did anybody get that as their net income?
Yes.
You did? Okay. So this is where those period costs go. Okay, seems like we always have some period costs in these exercises I'm giving you, and we never we never know where to put those. People are always like, where do I put these? It's like, well, this is where you finally put them. It's one of the last things you do. On the income statement, you list those operating expenses, the period costs, and they go, boom, straight to the income statement, okay? And you can see the basic structure of the income statement. Sales minus cost of goods sold equals gross profit minus operating expenses equals net income. Cool? All right. Okay, the other one I asked you to do was problem 18.7a. Is that right? Okay. We are not going to go over the answer to that right now, but I am going to give you some check figures. Okay? I'm going to give you some check figures. All right, so let me do that. Did anybody do that? Okay. Let's see if you got these. I got cost of goods manufactured to equal this number right here. Did you get that by chance? Anybody? You did? Okay. I got gross profit to equal this number. Did you get that? Huh?
That's what I got.
Okay. And then lastly, net income I got as this number right here. Did you get that? Okay. So if you didn't do that, or if you did it wrong, there's some check figures. We're going to go over that next time. okay? Because I want to make sure we have time to do what we need to do today. All right? So, okay, any questions on that? Remind me to go over that next time, and we certainly will, okay? Okay, let's go back to chapter 19, okay? We started chapter 19 last time, didn't we? Okay? Now, we talked about, first of all, process cost accounting, which is not chapter 19, but is rather chapter 20, okay? These are the sort of things that you see down here below. These are items that are mass produced. They're essentially identical to each other, and they are continually produced. That's chapter 20. That's not this chapter. Chapter 19 is instead job order cost accounting. This is the production of large, unique, high-cost items, okay? They are essentially built to order rather than mass-produced. And we're going to see that a lot of items can be directly traced to each job, okay? Some examples were a custom-built house, a custom-built museum, an in-ground swimming pool, or wedding announcements, yearbooks, those sort of things, okay? We talked about the starting point for job order cost accounting is the order must be received from the customer. Then they schedule the job, then they order the materials, and then they begin production, correct? Now, we get to this slide right here. And I think we started talking about this slide, did we not? Okay. We have materials. Again, think of the house that Blake's parents were building. We have materials. Those that are direct materials for that house, they like go out to that site and get dropped off. Those can be directly traced to the job, okay? Directly traced to the job. But indirect materials cannot be directly traced. So they are accumulated in this account called factory overhead, okay? What about labor? Well, labor that is direct can be directly traced to this job. And that's easy. I mean, when you think about like certain people show up at this work site and they work on that house all day, that's direct labor, isn't it? But there's other labor that is indirect. And just like indirect materials, it gets accumulated in this factory overhead, okay? These items can be directly traced to the job. These items are accumulated in a factory overhead, and they cannot be directly traced to the job. Well, how do we get those jobs, or how do we get those costs over there, okay? We cannot directly trace it, okay? No, we cannot directly trace it, okay? Let me give you a little example that I think will help clarify this, okay? Let's step out of the accounting world for a second. Let's go to the document camera, okay? Well, we don't need to yet. We can come off of it. When I was in college, I lived with two other guys in an apartment. Their names were Shane and their names were Juan. And they would be so happy today if they knew I was using them in my chosen profession, okay? But it was a 3-bedroom apartment. Like a lot of college people, we never sat down and had dinner together. We were always, had totally different schedules, okay? But I want to talk to you about how we kind of did groceries, and I think it'll help relate to this, okay? Let's say for purposes of this illustration, let's say that we didn't have any truck or any car. So my older brother was at school with me. So let's say that we made a list of groceries that we wanted him to get for the 3 of us, okay? And he went and got it and he brought it back. You with me? He brought back those groceries that we told him to get, okay? Now, let's say that my brother has a receipt here, okay? And let's say the total of the groceries is $200. Are you with me? Okay, total is $200, okay? Now, there's all these items listed here, okay? And they all add up to $200. Let's forget about sales tax for now, okay? Now, you have to understand, we didn't eat together, okay? Each one of us had our own cupboard, and each one of us had our own shelf in the refrigerator, okay? And that was my stuff, that was Shane's stuff, and this was Juan's stuff. And there was an unspoken rule, you don't take the other people's food. And we all had our own shelf in the refrigerator, okay? As a matter of fact, this is how I drink skim milk. Does anybody drink skim milk? The reason I drink skim milk is I used to drink vitamin D milk, but Shane and Juan would always drink my milk. And the only type of milk they hated was skim milk. So I started buying skim milk because those idiots wouldn't drink my milk. And I still drink skim milk to this day. That's just a side note. You won't be tested on that, okay? But we all had our own stuff. Is that correct? And so there were certain things that we liked to eat. I remember Juan ate a lot of ramen noodles. God bless the boy. He ate a lot of ramen noodles. I had a tendency to go more towards frozen pizzas, okay? So anyway, we have this list of groceries. My brother shows up and he says, hey, you all owe me $200 in total for the groceries that I just purchased for you. Are you with me? Okay, we go through this list and we identify, okay, these items are Dave's, okay? These items are Juan's, okay? And these items are Shane's, okay? You with me? And let's say we're trying to figure out how much cost is for each roommate. So this is Shane, this is Dave, this is Juan, okay? Well, if I add up all of Shane's purchases, it comes up to $50 worth of food. And if I add up all of Dave's, which is me, it comes up to $72 worth of food. And if I add up all of Juan's, it comes up to $60 worth of food. Now that adds up to, I think, $182, okay? Well, that's because not all of the items have been earmarked to one particular roommate, okay? You've got items like this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. Are you with me? Those are items that, you can come off that. There were certain items that we purchased that were not just for Dave, or just for Shane, or just for Juan, okay? They were for all of us. For example, we didn't all have our own salt and pepper, okay? We didn't all have our own roll of toilet paper. We didn't have our own paper towels. We didn't each have a bottle of ketchup. You see what I'm saying? Those sort of things were purchased, and they were for the use of all three of the roommates. Does this make sense? Now, you see how, let's look at the Elmo again. You see how there are certain items that are directly traceable to Shane, directly traceable to Dave, directly traceable to Juan, right? And they go on my shelf. But there are other things, and it looks like there's probably $18 worth, that is indirect. You can't trace it. Does it make any sense to, how many panels of toilet paper did you use this month, Juan? How many things of salt and pepper did you use? How many squirts of ketchup? You're not going to do that, are you? That makes no sense. So how do you think, looking at this Elmo, how do you think we divvied up that other $18? We just divided it by 3, okay? And so that's 18 divided by 3 equals 6. So when we're writing checks to my brother, Shane owes 56, I owe 78, Juan owes 66, and I believe and I hope that adds up to $200. Does that make sense? Does it add up to $200? I think it does. Okay? These are indirect items. These are direct. Direct items can be easily traced to the roommate, but these have to have some sort of means of allocating them because you cannot directly trace them to the roommates. Okay? Now, we divided it evenly. Might there be cases that we would not divide them evenly? Yeah, there might be. Like maybe instead of dividing up evenly 6, 6, and 6, we divide them up 7, 7, and 4. And maybe we did that because Shane always went back to Kansas City to see his parents. And so he was only at the apartment about 4 days a week. So we didn't make him pay as much. Does that make sense? But there has to be some sort of means of allocating that because we cannot directly trace it. Now go back to this illustration. Oh, let me switch over. Our factory overhead, we cannot directly trace, so we have to have some sort of means of allocating it. Does that make sense now? Sometimes we call that, we are going to assign that factory overhead. Okay? We're going to allocate or assign that. But that's how those costs get to goods in process. Okay? Now, let's take a look. Let's consider an example. This is just an example I made up. Let's say that there's a company called Road Warriors, and what they do is they install custom-created security alarms into automobiles and trucks. And if you look at their layout of their factory, this is kind of what it looks like. Okay? You've got the garage back here where people pull in, okay, the bays. Then you have these shelves here that have a lot of raw materials that they keep that they need for jobs. And then you've got some workstations, don't you? Okay? Make sense? So you kind of get a feel for this company. Okay? Now the primary document that we track the costs associated with a given job is what is called a job cost sheet. Let's look at one of these. This is the job cost sheet. Let's say we have a specific customer, Carol Connor, and this is where he lives. And we are going to install a level 1 alarm system onto his Ford Expedition. We assign a job number to it. This is job B15, B15. Okay? This is the date we started it, and this is the date we promised it to him. And we're going to install this alarm system onto his car or onto his Ford. Okay? Well, you can see that we have a section where we're going to keep track of the direct materials for that job, the direct labor for that job, and then we're going to keep track of the overhead assigned to that job. Okay? And here's where we will eventually list the totals. Does that make sense? And eventually we will arrive at our total cost. Okay? You with me? So let's see how we populate the direct materials portion of this job cost sheet. Well, what we have is we have something called a materials requisition. A materials requisition. This is a materials requisition. Let's say that one item that they need to do this alarm system is they need this small spool of alarm system wiring. And this is for that job number B15. So C. Luther fills out a materials requisition, and he requests some alarm system wiring for job number B15. Okay? Now the stock number of this material is M347. All right? Now, then somebody goes and finds that, and they provide it. This person right here, M. Bateman, they fill it, and then when they give it to Mr. Luther or Miss Luther, they sign it, that it was received. And that's how it ends up. This is how it ends up on the job cost sheet. This is the source document. And eventually it's listed right here. Okay? There's the stock number of that material, and there is the cost of it. Okay, and this will accumulate the totals down here. Does that make sense? Now, come off of there for a second. Can you see how, think of Blake's folks' house. When they're getting ready to plan that job, there is a long list of materials that they need for that house, is there not? Okay, and they're going to fill out materials requisitions, okay, for that. We need this much lumber, we need this much cement bags, we need this much, sand, this would be a huge document, but I guarantee you, Blake, that this document existed, okay? On a much smaller scale, let's say that you wanted to make a birthday cake for me, because my birthday's actually coming up. I can't wait to see what you all chip in and buy me. It's always so much fun every year. But my birthday's coming up, and let's say I need to make a birthday cake for Dave, since he's so incredible. Well, you might make a grocery list of things you need to make a cake. I need a cake mix. I need to buy some eggs. I need to buy some flour, right? Need to buy some icing. Need to buy some birthday candles. And you go to the grocery store and you pick up these things, right? Does that make sense? These are requesting the materials for a job. I actually did some consulting work for a company that was very similar to this one that we're looking at right now. What they did was, this was a company that, this is like they call these truck tractors, okay? Obviously the stuff goes on here. But what they did is back here, they created a power supply that generated all the power for this little living area that the trucker would have. Does that make sense? And what this place kind of looked like was, I'm not a very good artist, as you've figured out by this time, okay? They had a couple garage doors back here, and they would pull into these areas, okay? And then over here, they had a bunch of shelves of raw materials, okay? And, you know, then they had some office space up here and had some work tables and stuff like that, okay? But what they would do is when a truck would come in, when a truck would pull into here, they would sit down with the person and they would figure out exactly what sort of power system they wanted my client to create for them, okay? You can come off that. And then they would fill out a materials requisition, okay? And then what they would do is, there was a person there that they had one of those flatbed, you know, they have these at Home Depot or at Costco. And they would take this materials requisition, just like you at the grocery store buying birthday cake supplies. And they would go up and down these aisles and say, okay, I need 2 of these, and they'd put them on there. Okay, I need 1 of these. Okay, I need 3 of these. And then they would bring it to the person who was going to create the power system. They would sign off on it, and they'd say, here you go, here's your raw materials. You with me? That's how it happened. It was very similar, okay? So back to the computer, this is how this gets populated, all right? Now, questions? Any questions? Now, before we move on, note that every material that they keep to do this work, they have what is called a materials ledger card. This is that M347, and this is where it's located, okay? And this helps them keep track of how much alarm system wiring they have, okay? Well, at one point, they only had 1 unit. Then they purchased and received 2 more units, so now they have 3 units. Now, they've just issued out this unit that was requested for job B15. So now they have 2 units. They have to do this for every item that is in their raw materials down here. Now that seems like a major pain in the rumpus, doesn't it? But I want you to think about it. Come off that for a second. If you run out of alarm system wiring, how many units are you going to manufacture that day? You're not going to. Let me ask you this. Has anybody ever worked at a restaurant where you ran out of a key ingredient? Okay. What'd you run out of, Henry?
Lobster tails.
Where'd you work?
Seafood restaurant.
Seafood restaurant, you ran out of lobster tails. Daniel?
I don't know, limes.
Limes? Where'd you work? Jose Peppers?
Yeah.
Okay. I worked at Pizza Hut as a high school student. I made $3.35 an hour before taxes, okay? And I'm glad I worked that job at Pizza Hut. And the main reason is because, think about it. I was a cook at Pizza Hut. That was, in essence, a manufacturing environment, was it not? I mean, you had your dough, you had your sauce, you had your cheese, your green peppers, your pepperoni, your sausage, your hamburger, your mushrooms, all that sort of stuff. And I would get an order, and I would see, and I would make their pizza, right? Custom built for them, okay? So believe me, the knowledge that I gained from my accounting teaching was much more than the money I ever gained from that job. Okay, I think back to how horribly they paid me, okay? But there was a time we ran out of pepperonis. Well, do you know how many different pizzas have pepperoni in them as if not the only ingredient, as partially an ingredient? So we would go out to people and they'd go, what sort of pizza do you want? We want a pepperoni pizza and we want a supreme. Well, both those pizzas have pepperoni, so we don't have pepperoni. They'd look at us like we had 3 heads. Well, you don't have pepperoni. This is a pizza place, right? So production would shut down. Okay? So looking back at the computer, this company does not want to be in a situation where they run out of wiring. So what you have to do is you have to keep a materials ledger card for every raw material that you have. Okay? And here's the unique thing about it, is they have the minimum quantity, and when that minimum quantity is reached, they reorder 2 more units. Okay? Come off that again, please. Now, this is a lot easier because you have to remember that everything is barcoded. Okay? So you know my person that was pushing that cart full of the raw materials? Before they started working on it, somebody got the barcode reader and they scanned each item. So this materials ledger card, all of this was computerized, wasn't it? As a matter of fact, the computer kept track of, okay, there's one less wiring, there's one less spool of wiring. And they had it set up, as most manufacturing companies do, that if it reaches that minimum quantity, it probably shoots off an email and orders more wiring without even anybody having to do anything about it. Does that make sense? And I think somebody would show up each day, a vendor, and say, hey, here are the raw materials that you ordered. And the computer probably did it because they were notified that the minimum quantity on those different raw materials had been reached. You tracking with me? Okay? All right, cool. So that's how materials get put on there. All right? How does labor get put on there? Okay? How does labor get put on there? Labor gets put on there through what we call a time ticket. Okay? Labor is accumulated on this job cost sheet by what we call time tickets. Let's see one. Okay? Okay, let's say that there's this guy named T. Zeller, and he is employee number 3969. And on March the 8th, from 9 in the morning to noon, for those 3 hours, he is working on job number B15 for Carol Connor. Okay? Well, the hourly rate for T. Zeller is 20 bucks. So that total cost of $60 is going to get put over on that direct labor ticket. I'm sorry, on that job cost sheet in the direct labor section. Does that make sense? And T. Zeller might work on somebody else's job later on that day. Okay? Again, think of Blake's house that he had built. Those workers, no doubt, knew the job number of your parents' house, and when they would fill out their time tickets, they would mark which house they were working on. And if they switched between houses, they would do it accordingly. Does that make sense? Has anybody ever worked in a job where you had to keep track of which client you were working on? You have, Blake?
Yeah.
Where?
Covan Moving up in Manhattan.
Okay, you worked at a moving company.
Yeah.
And so you would keep track of whatever client it was?
Yeah, because there'd be separate orders on the semi-trucks, so we'd go to each place in turn and unload what we
Okay.
had, and we had to keep track of what we unloaded and at whose place in case things were misplaced. We can go back and find it.
Very good. Okay, so you kept track of for the moving company whose stuff you were unloading. Good. Anybody else? Okay, when I was in public accounting, I had to do this. Okay? And what I would do is I would get to the end of a 9-hour day, and I would say, okay, for 2.5 hours, I worked on ABC Company. And for 3.5 hours, I worked on our client Garmin. Okay. For 1 hour, I worked on XYZ Inc. client. And what are we up to here? 6, 7. And then for 2 hours, I worked on Sprint. Okay. And then they would charge my time accordingly to those clients. Does that make sense? Okay. So we always had to keep track of this. We kept track of it in 15-minute increments. Okay. Still remember filling out those time cards. Okay. But going back to the computer, this is how direct labor gets traced to that. Now, this is direct labor. Are you with me? All right. Any questions? Alrighty. Now, what about factory overhead? We cannot directly trace factory overhead to a job, just like we can't directly trace paper towels and ketchup and salt and pepper to the roommate as they use it. It doesn't make any sense, right? So how do we get those costs to the job cost sheet? We're not just, if we don't put anything here, the cost for B15 will be, it'll be underestimated, won't it? It will be too low. Well, the answer is we allocate it. We allocate it using a predetermined overhead rate, which sometimes I will say is a POHR, predetermined overhead rate. Let's take a look. Let's say that we are going to assign the manufacturing overhead, and we are going to use that predetermined overhead rate, and we are going to base it on direct labor cost. Somewhere along the way, we have come to the conclusion that the more labor that is incurred on a job directly, the more overhead that it seems to consume. Are you with me? Okay. So what we do is we figured out, and I'll show you how we figure this out in a minute, but we have a predetermined overhead rate of 160%. So as labor, as direct labor accumulates on our job cost sheet, we are going to take that times 160%, and that's how we're going to populate our overhead section. You with me? So if our labor is $60, $60 times 1.6 or 160% is 96. And the more direct labor on this job B15, obviously the more factory overhead that will be put onto this job. Cool? All right. Now, how did we come up with that predetermined overhead rate? How did we come up with that? Well, here's what we did. We're going to, we decided to base it on direct labor cost. So what we did at the beginning of the period was we estimated, what do we think our total manufacturing overhead cost will be? Okay. What do we think our estimated total manufacturing cost will be for the upcoming period? And then what we do is we estimate, what do we think our total direct labor cost will be for the upcoming period? Well, we estimated our total manufacturing overhead for the coming period as $200,000, and we estimated our total direct labor cost for the upcoming period as $125,000. 200 times 125 is that 160% rate of direct labor costs that we use as our predetermined overhead rate. You with me? Now,
so if you just started out, like let's say your company just started, would you use like somebody's other company that was similar to yours to determine that?
it's a great question. Let me answer it in a roundabout way. These are the estimates that we have, right? Now, do you think when the year is over, do you think that we will have incurred exactly $200,000 in manufacturing overhead? No. Do you think our direct labor costs will be exactly $125,000? No. These are estimates. Now, what do you think you will do if your estimate is way off?
Change it.
You'll change it for the next year, right? Now, Jeremiah, you're astute in knowing that if you've been doing this for a number of years, your estimate will get pretty good. Correct? Mm. But what do you do the very beginning? What do you come up with? Well, you make your best guess, you make your best estimate, but you're exactly right. What you might do is look at industry statistics. If you have a competitor maybe in another city, okay, sometimes when you're starting a business, you might consult with a competitor or somebody in the same industry, but you don't do it as in the same city as you are because they're competing, right? But if you're like an auto mechanic and you go to one in Tulsa, they're not competing for the same jobs, right? I had my own business once that we did in Wichita, and I found a competitor in Tulsa when we traveled down there, and he helped us quite a bit, but he knew that we would never be competing for the same jobs. You with me? So that would be another way of doing it. But you adjust this as it goes along. Very good question. Okay? Now, we're wrapping up here, but you have actually seen something like a job cost sheet before. I know you have. Do you know where you have seen that. Do you know where you've seen that? Where you have seen that is, think about if you took your car into the shop to get worked on. Let's look at this job cost sheet. Don't they have a section where they keep track of the materials that they put on your car? And don't they have a section where they keep track of the labor? Now, they usually don't have, they don't call this factory overhead. But sometimes what you might have, let's actually switch over to the Elmo, okay, is they might keep track, and down here they total up your direct materials, you know, whatever amount, and your direct labor, whatever amount. But then a lot of times, and this is like the invoice, okay, and this is the detail right here of the materials and the labor, okay? But then a lot of times what they will do on the bottom here is they will say shop fee, or they'll call it something like that, and they'll charge you a $30 shop fee. Have you ever seen that? There's different terms for that. Shop fee, or I'm trying to think of some of the others. They just make up something. But this is kind of for the cost that's incurred in that shop that cannot be directly traced to the jobs, okay? And they might have got that shop fee by maybe at the beginning of the year, they said, what's our estimated total amount of shop fees that we think we will have for the next year? And what is the estimated number of jobs that we think we will work on for the next year? Okay. Well, let's say, well, we think our total shop fees will be $60,000. Okay. And we think the total number of jobs we'll work on is 2,000 jobs. Are you with me? Mm-hmm. Well, that comes out to $30 per job. And that's what they put on there. These are based on estimates, right? Okay. All right, questions? Are you tracking with me? Like I said, as a reminder though, these concepts have to do with non-manufacturing situations as well. And really an auto mechanic is kind of that, isn't it? Okay. And when I worked at the public accounting firm, that was a service industry, right? Think about if you were a landscaper. Let's say you were doing a custom patio for somebody. Wouldn't you keep track of the materials, the labor, and you'd probably allocate some overhead to the job? Okay. You need to know the true cost of your job because you need to be able to price it accordingly, correct? Or you're not going to make money. All right? Okay, any questions? All right, so let's just, before we end here, let's go back to the computer, and let's just summarize what we have talked about, the document flow, okay? We have materials requisitions. If they're direct materials, they go straight to the job cost sheets. If they're indirect materials, we accumulate those in this factory overhead account, okay? We have employee time tickets. Some of those will be direct labor, and they can be traced right to the job cost sheets. But some of those will be indirect labor. Like maybe they're the people who purchase the materials, or they're supervisors or something. Well, their labor is not traced to the job cost sheet directly, but is rather accumulated in this factory overhead account. Okay, make sense? You can come off that. And eventually that factory overhead is allocated or assigned, or sometimes we even use the word applied. Okay, they all start with A. Allocated, assigned, or applied to the job itself. You with me? Okay, I think that's enough for today. Let me give you what I want you to do as homework, and we will call it a day. Okay? I think I actually have this written up today for you. So what I want you to do for homework is, if you haven't already done problem 18.7a, requirement 1 and 2, go ahead and do it. And I also want you to read those pages listed there in your textbook, 778 and 787. And I want you to do quick study 19.1, exercise 19.2, 19.3, and 19.5. Okay, this was lecture 226, correct? We have lecture 227, 228, and then we have the test. So you kind of know where we are, okay? Remember to be checking those connect dates of when things are assigned, you folks at home that are in my online class. And are there any last minute questions? Hey, you're getting out early today. What a treat. Okay, we'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.